Good evening, everybody. How are y'all doing out there? You guys, thank you so much for joining us here this evening. We certainly appreciate it. Of course, something a little bit different for tonight's chat is the fact that Richard has agreed to join us here. Very excited to have him on. But before, of course, we get into this evening's conversation, I just want to make sure that you guys can hear us. The mic is set up a little bit differently. So if you could just verify that before we get too far into the conversation. And speaking, of course, of the conversation, I do want to remind you, whether you are here watching live or if you are checking out the replay, don't forget that just because the conversation ends, the live portion of our conversation ends. Okay, thank you, Stephanie. That does not mean that the conversation has to stop. Of course, there is the comment section, pardon me, in the posted video. I do invite you to please leave your comments, your perspectives, your opinions, your questions. And as always, I do encourage you not to just leave a comment, but to engage in conversation with other people who have left a comment. So read theirs, see if anything sparks up a conversation between the two of you. So again, thank you everybody for being here. We really do appreciate it. Richard, welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, everybody.
We hope that you guys have had a good day. Um, so this evening's conversation, obviously, I've invited Richard to be on here. There's certainly, the previous conversations that I have had, Richard and I have discussed those. And there are topics of conversation that, while I have a small business, Richard also, of course, has a small business. So if you're not familiar, Richard, your business is.
The inn.
It is the inn, yeah.
Yeah,
It's the Scioto Inn.
the Scioto Inn.
And how long have you had the inn?
13 and a half years I've been open.
13 and a half years. Now, when you got this, it was not originally an inn.
No,
What was it?
when I purchased it, it was a 4 apartment building.
For apartment building.
Mhm.
And there were tenants living here when you had.
There were 2 tenants, one of which moved out immediately. The last one did stay through a good bit of the renovation.
Mhm.
Um, kind of kept an eye on the property while we were doing work here. It was a 2-year renovation, so made us a little nervous to just have it sitting empty.
Yeah. And
Um,
it took you 2.5 years, you said.
it was 2 years to get the main 2 floors done and open for business.
Okay.
So the lower level was another year after that.
Okay. Now, with regards to like the construction, you did much of it yourself, didn't you?
Yeah. So it was a very interesting process. Um, I went into it pretty blind. The purchase of the inn was actually a fluke. It went to auction. The auction was October 31st of 2009. So
Halloween.
it was on Halloween, and it was a giant estate. There were multiple properties, and I went with a friend that wanted to see the antiques, and I just was going along to watch. And the real estate came up, and they had no buyers that day, so it was bought sight unseen because it was cheap,
Okay.
with more of the intention of flipping it. At the time, I was selling real estate.
Okay. Now, when you were going to flip it, were you going to buy it and flip it as an apartment unit or?
I didn't even know what it was. I knew
Oh,
it was
you didn't even know what it
a,
was.
I knew it was a building downtown Urbana. So,
Okay.
um, but again, the price was so low. It was one of the odds that we couldn't just put a sign right back out in front and sell it and try to make some money. But I got into the building, and um, I found it was 4 apartments. They were shotgun apartments, front to back, and it just had. Um, there's just something about it.
Yeah.
I liked the building. It was ideal for doing something like this. So I kept the 1 apartment, took the other 3, and divided them.
Mhm.
Um, But almost immediately, with the renovation, people started coming up and saying, "Hey, you need to do this. You need to do that. You don't have approval."
Oh, approval.
That was, I mean, even the paint on the house. As soon as I started to paint,
Hmm.
somebody stopped me and said, "You have to have all your paint colors approved before you can do that to the property." Now, this
He's gonna whine the entire time.
now I got her. She's digging on me.
Oh boy.
Come here.
The dogs are coming up with us because this one right here will whine the
Oh,
entire time. She's fine.
she's fine.
She's
She's
fine.
jealous.
Yes, we can't leave one down without the other. We have to
He's
speak up.
okay. I know my voice is really doesn't carry very well.
Let's do this.
Oh Lord.
Ah,
It's,
you might be able to hear some sniffing right now. Those are the dogs.
yeah. Definitely the dogs. I'm not sure about this close up.
Why? You look
She
fine.
almost jumped off. I know, but
So you had a lot.
if
So
the
a lot of.
downstairs look like tree trunks, they're too close.
Oh, please! I have black hair. So, um, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so you were having a lot of local input with
Yes.
regards to what you could not do. That came through city ordinances, the building
Yes.
department, fire department. So really, you were really put in a position to kind of have to go the mile,
Hmm.
if you will, to open this up as
Yes.
specifically as an inn.
Yes.
Now, the inn is it's considered a transient
Yes.
use building.
So I should preface this by saying, um, obviously, codes are different everywhere.
Yes.
So a lot of this is based on Ohio code. Um, when I talk about the paint colors, I thought this was interesting. This is the entire downtown of Urbana is an historic overlay. So the overlay is what dictated paint colors. It was because it was historic. They wanted to protect the historic structures. And we have since found out that they actually do not have any legal authority to do that. They no longer dictate paint colors. But at the time, they thought they were able to do that and stopped me and wanted to have all that approved.
Mhm.
So anything to the exterior of the building had to be approved. So
Mhm.
roofing, windows, that which I did not replace windows.
Yeah.
But the roofing, the paint colors, that kind of thing had to be approved. So um, that is kind of specific to Urbana. Obviously, any community that would do um, their own regulations.
Mhm.
So, but it was very quick that I was doing a change of use on the building. So I was taking it more from well, it wasn't short term, it's long term rental,
Yeah.
which is still residential use, into transient use. And transient use is anything that is under 30 days stay. And that incorporates all of the hotel use. So
Okay.
uh, there's still been question for me on this one, um, because there are a number of people that will open a bed and breakfast
Okay.
when it's owner occupied and they are renting rooms nightly in their house as a bed and breakfast. It is
Mhm.
still zoned residential.
Mhm.
For some reason, they came to me and decided that they wanted to change it to a commercial use
Okay.
for transit use. So I did have to change the zoning. Um, Regardless, I was changing the format of the building from an apartment building into a dwelling that was transit use. So
Mhm.
what that boils down to is an occupancy permit.
Mhm.
I think this will kind of lead into what we're talking about, but
Okay.
the whole point of an occupancy permit, if you guys don't know, um, it's partially set up for safety. So the building department gets involved, and they are going to go through and inspect a property. New construction, new houses
Mhm.
um, have to have an occupancy permit issued.
Mhm.
So when you build a new house, the building inspector comes through They walk through the house, they make sure that the house is safe, that things are done to code to protect you, and then they issue an occupancy permit. Same thing anytime you change the use of a structure. So
Mhm.
um, the purpose is that that occupancy permit is also opened up for the fire department to see. In case there's a fire in the facility,
Mhm.
the fire department needs to know what the use of the building is. So when they come into the situation, um, they know, like for me, that there are people sleeping here that may not be familiar with this facility. They actually have a lockbox on site that they are the only ones that can access, and that has to have updated keys to every room on the property. Um, they know they they can see on the occupancy permit exactly how many rooms there are, where they're located, and they know what to check in case of
Mhm.
a fire to make sure that they can get people out safely. So um, that I think holds true for any occupancy permit. When you've got a restaurant, they know, if it's during the 5 to 6 o'clock hour of the day, that could be peak time for that restaurant to be full of people.
Mhm.
So they know what they're getting into at that point if there's a fire. Obviously, at 3 o'clock in the morning, they're going to assume that there's probably nobody in the building, not near
Right.
as, they're not going to put a firefighter's life at risk
Right.
if there's no reason to. So that is one of the key points that I think in our discussion
Mhm.
is the fact that you have to have an occupancy permit for the use of any building.
Mhm.
Um, that has been very interesting for me in the course of my business. I've learned a lot from
Mhm.
doing this. Um, and, we are going to discuss a little bit about Airbnb this
Mhm.
evening. And, and there are definitely pros and cons to that. So we were thinking that this would be an interesting topic for everybody
Mhm.
because everybody travels,
Mhm.
um, especially with a lot of your viewers that love antiques.
Mhm.
Some are resellers that are traveling to buy, others are just buyers
Mhm.
that, they want to go, um, say, to the Springfield
Yeah.
extravaganza. And, especially at times like that, there's a shortage of places to stay, and definitely Airbnb fills a need.
Mhm.
So it can be a good thing. I think from our side of it, we wanted to do a little bit of a discussion as far as the safety so that you guys
Mhm.
know what you're getting into if you do choose to use an Airbnb. Um, they do have a purpose.
Mhm. Well, and I think too, also there are a lot of parallels that I think that you can really draw. Small business is small business, and there are a lot of things. I think that clearly, talking to the audience out there, I am speaking about it through the lens of my business, and I'm speaking about it through the lens of my experience. And that it's not just exclusive to content creators, it's not just exclusive to a reseller. A lot of the nuances that do exist within a business exist kind of across the board. The idea or concept of this evening's topic is it's really the capitalization of small business by big business, and how that does affect us, the requirements that are placed upon us. Now clearly those are a little bit, they're nuanced because clearly Richard's business is different than my business, yet I feel you can still draw parallels between the two, and it is really about big business leveraging the smaller businesses. um, we had a conversation about it earlier, and it was one of those things where as a small business, sometimes you can feel very much like you're out there on your own, and I need to be a part of something. Advertising is a huge thing for small businesses, and that's not exclusive to resellers. That's all businesses really need to have that marketing component, especially when you talk about a business like Richard's, where he relies by and large mostly on travelers. The population of Urbana is, and I'm going to round up, the actual last census data was 12,000. It's like 11,503, I think. but it was under 12,000. So that really isn't enough to sustain a transient use or an inn.
Hmm.
And there is also a hotel
Hmm.
that is within the city limits. And for a small business, then you can't rely just on the town. I can't just continuously try to rely on my subscribers. You always have to try to build your business. Um, Absolutely, Stephanie, and word of mouth is so incredibly
Hmm.
important, and that's something we do want to talk about, like with regards to reviews that can be left for businesses, most businesses now. Um, See, I can't read and talk at the same
I
time.
can't
That's
do it either.
it goes right out of
That's
my
it.
head.
Stop. Yeah, every time I start reading, I'm not listening to
I,
anything you're saying.
I was just like, what? Um, it's interesting, but yes. So one of and I used a couple of logos, obviously, with a thumbnail tonight, and for the community post, the Instagram post, the ones that I used for on that would most affect. Of course, Richard's business would be like Airbnb and Expedia. I draw a parallel between like a Whatnot and an eBay. All four of those services exist to help leverage a small business reach a larger audience. That is, I will say on both of our behalf, regardless of whether or not you're using social media. An Airbnb, I think that we all, it's kind of like a household. It's a recognized
Hmm.
name. Trivago is certainly something I think that most of
Hmm.
us do recognize. Uh,
VRBO, vacation rental by owner,
what?
is another.
What is it called? Oh, Verbo.
Verbo.
Verbo is the new and up and coming one. You
Yes.
said
VRBO.
VRBO. That's what I was
Verbo.
like.
Okay.
What? We know it by Verbo. He knows it
Hmm.
by so it's an acronym.
Yes.
Say it again.
Vacation rental by owner.
I didn't know that. There, we learned something new. And then on my behalf, like an organization or a company like eBay and whatnot, those exist to help, again, a small reseller be able to reach a national audience. And what those four do, and it's not and I want to be clear, those are examples. It's not just those specific organizations. I'm sure there are many that you guys are going to be able to think of, but each of those businesses is built upon smaller businesses and how then they leverage the small business, not just on behalf of the small business, but more specifically on their actual organization and how leveraging those small businesses benefits them as a larger organization. Um, so yeah, I think, obviously a lot of it, um, most of it, I think a lot of people inherently recognize Airbnb,
Hmm.
for the,
Believe it or not, it's a territorial thing.
oh,
In Ohio, people recognize Airbnb.
um,
Very little of the VRBO. But there are other areas. Don't quote me on this, but I feel like Michigan,
Verbo,
yes, is more familiar with Verbo.
yes.
So, and I don't know why that is.
Oh, we were
But
having this conversation with Gus. I
mhm,
remember that.
yeah,
Hmm.
because a lot of people tend to go straight to Verbo to try to locate properties. And there are not very many listings on that site
Yeah,
for Ohio.
hmm
So you kind of have to go back and forth between the two. But they're both platforms for transient use.
hmm
And yeah, I mean, they're basically the same difference.
hmm
So just two different platforms.
So I have a question for you.
Hmm.
So you've had the inn for 13 years. Yeah.
Yes.
At what point did you feel, I don't know how long Airbnb has actually been around. I think Airbnb has been around longer than 13 years, but not
It has,
necessarily as
but
prevalent in the United States as is what it
mhm,
is now.
yes.
But with regards to the history of the inn,
So in the last 5 years, it started to become much more visible here.
okay.
So, and definitely COVID, it did change a lot. I
Hmm.
think, um, actually, I was telling Michael today the story behind Airbnb, and I did not know this. I learned something too.
Hmm.
Airbnb, its founders named it that because they were renting space in their living room with air mattresses to people that just needed a place to stay for the night.
Hmm.
So that's how it got the name Air Bed and Breakfast. So they were putting people on air
Well,
mattresses,
of course they were.
and the concept was created and took
That was
off.
like
So
Holland or Germany.
it was San Francisco. That's where they were living.
Oh, I thought it was like some European thing.
That's what it said on Google,
Mhm.
because Google has all the answers.
You know they do, of
Yes.
course. So with
But anyway,
yeah, but in the
so
history of the inn,
yes,
at what point, like in the history of the inn, did you
it's
become aware of Airbnb or feel the need to use Airbnb?
it became much more prevalent.
Okay,
Um,
in the last five
yeah, in the
years.
last 5 years. So probably just before COVID hit,
Okay,
I was getting familiar with it.
okay.
Definitely after COVID, its
Hmm.
use went up significantly
Why do you
in this
feel that
area.
is?
Well, people were still. I'm not positive about that, other than I think a lot of the Airbnbs are a lot more. They tend to be more private.
Hmm.
You're renting a space. You're not in a giant hotel with a lot
Hmm.
of people. The checkout procedures are typically very different.
Hmm.
Most people will have a coded access. I personally do. I'm gonna air this.
Well, no, that's
Yeah.
not.
Okay.
That's not.
I have a very simple check-in
Yeah.
process for people, so it's not the standard for hotels.
Mhm,
So
mhm. It's
uh,
a much more intimate
yes,
experience, right?
it is.
It's not, it's
And I think people were looking for a different experience too. They
mhm,
were getting away from the box hotel that was
mhm.
just very impersonal. They wanted an experience.
Well, which is what I think that is interesting though too,
Mhm.
is that I think, and um you'll have to let me know. Yes, this is being monetized. So ads will appear. I'm surprised the ads are appearing during the live, but I don't have control over that. So I apologize, but we're not selling anything. So, you can just kind of hit skip and catch up to us. There's nothing I don't think that's really going to be so detrimental that, if a commercial interrupts what we're saying, that
You'll miss anything.
yeah, I mean, it's all going to play out the
Mhm.
way that it plays out. So, um,
I will
I,
say the other thing about Airbnb was price. So when you look at Airbnb, I know a big draw to that platform is the price points. You could get rooms much cheaper than the hotels that were in the local area.
okay. So a question, Richard's holding both dogs now. You can't see them. They're maintaining below the
Mhm.
camera angle.
But
So
they're piled up.
they are. Louis loves that. Um, so, I think that's a really good point, is because I will draw a parallel um, between like kind of like Airbnb and whatnot. So really what it does is it provides Airbnb is providing this very intimate experience, right? For people that are looking to travel outside of the norm. Not only are they looking maybe for a more intimate experience, something that's not so sterile, if you will, with regards to like a traditional hotel or motel. One big advantage to it is price point, right? So maybe a lot of folks out there, especially from its inception, when we think about it though, and I think this is a really important component, right? Is since the inception of Airbnb as an organization, they have really
Really try
prioritized
to put it.
um, having a lower price point, and that lower price point is reflective of maybe a lack of privacy, if you will. So you're sharing a room within somebody else's house. So clearly, you're typically not going to be as inclined to spend as much for that. But I think that it's an interesting topic or point, because I think that over time, maintaining that lower price point, it really built an expectation with regards to Airbnb.
Mhm.
Now, I don't think that's all the same. I think that you can go on to Airbnb now and you can see some real luxury kind of accommodations, and you do pay what you would expect to pay for an accommodation like that. And I think that it's interesting too, because I have said this in regards to kind of like Whatnot, is that like at the inception of Whatnot, they very much created an intimate experience vis-a-vis selling live, right? And one way that they really enticed, the consumer to use it was to say to them, or to create an environment of things starting at $1, or sellers having things that would be giveaways. So, you could find it was that intimate experience. It was an intimate experience, but they really leveraged it by saying, well, you
It's
can get
also a
things
good deal.
cheaper. Right. It's a good deal. But as time has gone on and things have grown, they have built an expectation that if you're going to buy something off of Whatnot, you're traditionally going to see it start at $1. Where on Airbnb, you're going to get a lower rate if you book on Airbnb, which I think can put a small business that relies solely
Mhm.
on this for income, that it can put them in a
There's
difficult
a strain.
spot. There's a strain.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question
Uh-huh.
in regards to that specifically. Do you, okay, and you got to stay with us on this one. You
Uh-oh.
do. No, no, but seriously. So is your rate the same if they were to call you directly versus what is on Airbnb? So if I wanted to book room 203, or no, wait, that's not on there.
No.
Richard does not
So
have all rooms on Airbnb.
and I do list on Airbnb. I
Okay.
use that platform. Um, but I changed a bunch of the stuff this year on it. I will say it is actually cheaper to book directly than it is through Airbnb.
Okay.
Now, Airbnb has a
Wait, before you get too ahead of yourself. Okay. Are you listing the room for the same rate? 100's on there, isn't it?
I don't know what I changed it to.
Do you, okay. So in thinking back,
Uh,
was the room listed for the same?
Initially, I listed it at the same price that I would normally rent it for.
Okay.
So,
So
yes.
if a consumer, if somebody were to book
Mhm.
via Airbnb, even though the price is reflective of what somebody would see on Airbnb and on the website, where did they pay more at? Ultimately, where did they end up paying more at?
Airbnb.
Why?
Um, Airbnb will take a percentage of my uh, fee, and it's minimal. I believe it's 3%, which is not that much. Airbnb is a lot friendlier to the host than something like Expedia, and we can talk more about that in a minute. But Airbnb also charges the traveler fees. So that is where, when you combine those fees together, you're paying quite a bit more to book through Airbnb than if you would book directly. Now,
So to clarify,
uh,
if I make a reservation on Airbnb and I am seeing a price, and let's just for the sake of making it easy, the price is it's $100 a night.
mhm,
Airbnb is going to collect 3% from you,
yeah,
and then I am going to be charged an Airbnb fee,
mhm,
a booking fee through
on top of
Airbnb.
the 100.
Yeah. So do you know what that rate is? Is that like a
I
standard
don't know
rate or
what
does
that
it
is.
fluctuate?
No, I think it's pretty standard.
Okay.
Um, they keep it pretty simple from that aspect.
Mhm.
Um, Airbnb does a couple interesting things. One is that in certain locations, they will collect the taxes for the host. So, and this was interesting too. I've learned more about this recently, that I have always had to collect sales tax because I provide a service. I'm in
State.
the service industry. Yeah, state sales tax. I also collect bed tax, and that is a local tax.
Okay.
So the the guest is the one that gets charged those fees. So
Mhm.
obviously, if I charge $100, I'm adding the tax rate and the bed tax rate,
Mhm.
so the state tax and the bed tax on top of that $100 fee. So, and then I have to pay those out every month.
Mhm.
Um, and for whatever reason, Airbnb will only do certain areas. So in our area, they will not pay the taxes for me. But I have found where I can put a percentage fee
Mhm.
that's tacked onto my rate to cover those taxes. They transfer the money to me. I still have to pay that out.
So the
So,
reason that that's important
mhm,
to know is because, and this is more so on as an owner,
mhm.
right?
As the host,
As the host.
I was actually losing a lot more money initially because I was not only not able to charge the guest the taxes,
Mhm.
they were taking their 3%.
Mhm.
So that's why in the last year I've changed the rates a little bit, which now include the taxes,
Mhm.
and it helps cover that percentage
Mhm.
because I don't want to rent rooms online less than I'm charging the guests that call me directly.
Mhm. Let me ask you this question then. So, do you find, and this is personal
Mhm.
experience, of course, do you find that Airbnb has been so consistent with bookings that you rely on Airbnb as like a source of income?
I do consistently get bookings on Airbnb.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people prefer to do that. It's every situation is a little bit different. Now, I will tell you that
Okay.
for me,
Mhm.
I don't offer an online booking for the inn.
Right.
You cannot go to my website and book a room. You have to call me directly. Other places you have that
Hmm.
capability. Um, for me, I'm not so tech savvy. Um, if I did an online booking and then I went to Airbnb and they're booking, how do you sync the two schedules together
Hmm.
so that you're not overbooking rooms? When I only have a few rooms here at the inn, so I don't have the luxury of having extra rooms available in case I overbook.
Of overbooking.
That is, yes, that has happened to me once, and knock on wood, in 13 years, and it was terrible. And I don't ever want that to happen again. So I'm very guarded. I'm over cautious
Because the
about
onus
that.
then was on you as a
Yes.
host.
And I had to relocate those people
Yeah.
that were coming in. And, you know, things happen, but
Hmm.
you feel terrible. You can get a bad review from that.
Do
A
you,
small business cannot afford bad reviews.
I'm curious, do you think that you said you weren't tech savvy.
Mhm.
Is that one of the driving factors for you to be on Airbnb?
It provides a platform for people to book. If they want to book it at 2 o'clock in the morning, they can go on and book it.
Hmm.
For me, I had to set parameters because this type of business is 7 days a week,
Hmm.
365 days a year, and people call me 24 hours a day.
Hmm.
So I can't be that available. I started saying that I was open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Now, obviously, with guests in the building, I have to answer the phone after 8 p.m.
Hmm.
in case guests need something.
Hmm.
But, for the sake of um, public information, that's
Hmm.
what I put it out
Hmm.
as those 12 hours that I'm available. Now, I'm not going to book a room at midnight. I've got to sleep.
Hmm.
So Airbnb provides people that opportunity if they want to try to book. Now, I am still set up that I have to approve any booking through Airbnb.
Hmm.
So
I apologize about him. He is
let me
being
see if
okay.
that helps.
It's because Richard, we're both here. He'll usually be okay if one of us is here, but if both of us are here, then forget it. He's got to be just right here. All right. We're going to do a little experiment here.
I don't
I don't know if that's going to
know.
work or not.
He's looking.
Hmm. I do. Tiffany does have a question, and
Sure.
I'm interested in this though too. I kind of know the answer, but I think it would be good for clarification.
Hmm.
So Tiffany is asking around my
I
area,
see.
the Airbnb has cleaning fees, which are she is saying are extremely high.
Hmm.
And do the host set those fees, or does there?
Yes. So it's funny you asked that because that was on my mind. Um, Airbnb is a very interesting platform to me. It does allow the host a lot of options. And so a number of these hosts, in order to draw you in, will advertise a very low rate.
Okay.
They'll say our room is $50 a night. But by the time you get ready to check out, they have inflated it. So
Okay.
Airbnb gives the host an opportunity. Like I was saying, I was able to include the taxes.
Hmm.
So I could put, and I don't know what category they have that listed at, but I end up collecting 13 and a quarter percent for tax between the state tax and the bed tax. Our bed tax is 6%,
Hmm.
state is 7 and a quarter. So I had to calculate how to get, that 13 and a quarter percent included in anytime somebody booked. And they
Hmm.
had a category for it. But there's a whole list of categories of charges that you can incorporate
What are some of
for a
those?
guest. I'd have
So,
to look at them because I never liked that concept
okay.
because I think it irritates people when they go to check to actually make that reservation and they think they're gonna, a 2 night stay is gonna cost them $100 and all of a sudden it's a $400
Hmm.
charge, and they don't show you that till right before you click accept,
Hmm.
and then you're irritated and you have to start the process over and think I didn't want to pay $400, I wanted to pay 100.
Yeah.
So
What is there's a state tax that is collected, and then you are also required to collect what is referred to as what?
local bed tax.
The local bed tax. And
um,
that tax does what specifically?
so this is going to vary in any area, and like state taxes specific to our state, etc. Well, and that's actually not even
So we all know most states, not all states,
collect the
collect a
sales tax.
state sales
Yeah.
tax. We all know that the state sales taxes vary from state to state to state.
Okay. So bed tax will vary from county to county.
Okay.
And in our county, we have a 6% bed tax. That bed tax is in the past has been collected by the county auditor. So I will collect it from my guest. And once a month, I have to, well, the county tax was submitted quarterly. So ours has changed recently. So the city is now taking half of the bed tax monthly. The other half goes to the county quarterly to make it nice and confusing.
Mhm.
But the county would submit that to the Visitors Bureau via the chamber, and that is how the Visitors Bureau in the county has funds to operate. That is their main source of revenue. So the more advertising they do in the community, the more tourism comes in, the more rooms I book, the more people there are eating, shopping, spending money, and building the
Mhm.
tax base for the community. But back to the lodging, the more rooms we book, the more bed tax we pay, the more bed tax we collect, the more money the Visitors Bureau has to market your community. It's a great relationship.
Are there other local businesses like here in town? Is there any other business that
No,
collects?
lodging is the only thing that is required to collect a bed tax. It's bed tax.
Okay.
So you literally are getting taxed for renting your bed
Mhm.
out.
Well, Barb, obviously you do federal and you do state taxes, and that comes once a year.
Mm-hmm.
But your bed tax is done quarterly.
Well, there's city tax. Those three are done. City, state, and federal tax are done yearly.
Okay.
And then sales tax is done monthly. Bed tax, I do. The city stepped in here in Urbana and decided they wanted to take half the bed tax and put it in general fund. I don't know how that ever came about as a good idea. I don't believe in it, but they take 3% and that has to be paid monthly. So the county is now only collecting 3%. They keep a small handling fee,
Mhm.
and then the rest is transferred to the Visitors Bureau. So the Visitors Bureau in Champaign County is not collecting near the amount of money they could be, which is a shame.
Mhm.
But that's the way it is here.
Mhm.
So yeah, it is a mess of taxes to try to keep straight.
Mhm. Okay, so let me ask you this.
Mhm,
We're in a small town.
mhm,
We've established, there's population 12,000, a little under 12,000.
mhm,
Okay. There is the inn
mhm.
and there is a hotel,
Yeah,
that
54 room. I believe it's 54.
a 54 room
Mhm.
um, hotel that exists here. Okay. And that's really it for your traditional
Lodging.
lodging. Okay. So, and this is kind of, and this to me is really where I want to focus the conversation, is about the idea and concept then of these platforms that exist like Airbnb, and we will touch, of course, on like Trivago and like a
Mhm,
whatnot and like an eBay. These platforms exist to better leverage your small business, right?
mhm,
By putting, maybe your tech, you don't have the tech savviness, you
mhm.
don't like the social media, you don't have the know-how to do the social media, and you really want to be able to reach a national and or global audience, right? And that is something that Airbnb does for you, though.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you have to pay for that service, clearly,
Yeah.
right? Um, and it is a 3% fee that they collect from you,
Yeah.
right? And then all the other fees are charged to the
The
person who is
guests.
booking.
Yes.
Okay. So, again, just to clarify that for you,
Mhm,
for Richard to list a $100 a night room, Airbnb is essentially taking $3
mhm,
then out of that. All taxes are required. You pay for that. And then any fee above and beyond that, the host is determining, I'm going to charge this for cleaning if
mhm.
I'm going to charge it at all.
That's how they inflate their fee.
Okay. So then
So,
they're able to then kind of make more on their room. Their advertising is one, but then they are hoping that, once
mhm,
you've seen the photo, you've fallen in love,
mhm,
that's the room, then they
they have
inflate
you
it on
hooked.
the back end, and you're like, well, dang, now I'm gonna go ahead and get that.
Well,
Um,
I think the hope is that at that point, you're tired of looking
mhm.
and you're just going to give in and pay it.
And you've settled on that one.
Uh,
So, you know, this is interesting to me. So, and I think that there has been a lot of conversation
mhm,
about this. And this is also something that I'm going to reference more so. And I will say this is that eBay is probably the least so for, like on my end, the one that I don't draw the straightest parallel between that, because it's pretty much, it's really straightforward. All of
mhm,
the fees that are paid, those come from the seller, right?
mhm,
Outside of, the buyer will pay for the item, they pay the sales tax, and they pay for the shipping. But all fees above and beyond that are incurred then by the seller, right?
mhm,
What that does for me as a small business, though, is it does allow me to reach a global audience.
mhm,
So that fee, which is a variable fee, is, in my opinion, worth it to me, because that goes well above and beyond, my YouTube channel, or of course utilizing Instagram, right? It has an audience built into it that I am not able to reach. So that's kind of neither here nor there. The one that I draw the most direct line to is kind of, again, I'm going to go back to whatnot, is that there are additional fees that kind of are baked in there on the back end that you don't necessarily know. Like shipping is a big one. There's a lot of overinflated shipping that does occur, and that is because whatnot does profit off of that shipping. So, a lot of things, when I say as an like if you were to call me and come to my live sale and buy something directly from my live sale, is that the shipping, I say it's calculated shipping. So the shipping that I pay is the shipping that you pay. So I'm not overinflating the shipping. In other words, I'm not adding on a back end
hidden
fee, a
fees.
hidden fee on the
Yeah.
back end so that I can better profit off of it. We're utilizing a platform like Whatnot. I don't see that fee as a seller, but you as the consumer see the fee. You may or may not realize that, but that is actually the truth. I don't think
Mhm.
they don't line invoice. Whereas like on an Airbnb, when you book it, you're going to see
You do
the
see.
the line item
Yeah.
invoice right before you check out. So I think that those things are incredibly important. They serve a purpose, and I want to make sure Richard uses Airbnb. So it's I just lost my shoe. So it's not like we're out here trying to say it's bad.
Mhm.
It serves a purpose,
It's
but we're
it does.
trying we want to
Now
talk
I
about
want
it.
to take that a step further, but we're going to come back to the big business thing too. So
Okay.
because Airbnb was brought up last week,
Hmm.
and I didn't mean to sound negative about it, but from my standpoint, trying to provide, um,
Can I
uh-huh,
can I interject really quick? So I think this is, and going back into last week's conversation, and I know that this is a very hot button topic for me to discuss on my platform. It is, and I get that. When I had made the point, I think the question was asked, but I answered it truthfully, in my opinion, about is the market oversaturated? Is this how the conversation came up? And is the market oversaturated with reselling across social media platforms? And in my opinion, and again, it is an opinion, and I do want to make sure that I recognize it as such, that the landscape with a variety of different platforms, eBay's, whatnots, Instagrams, YouTubes. We've got district. Now we've got a number of individuals having their own marketplaces, though most of what is being sold is same similar. So it serves a purpose in allowing people the opportunity to reach an audience that they traditionally would not, as an individual, to reach an audience they would not individually be able to. There is a benefit to that. There absolutely is. There is a cost to every business, whether you are, an inn or whether you're a reseller. You are going to pay for the benefit of that, right? That is wonderful. That is great. It allows entry level people to try something. It makes it much easier to approach it from a small business perspective. This is something that I don't think that a lot of people do give a lot of thought to. And I'll use this as an example, and I hope it cues you up to go where you want to go. Is that historically, regardless of the selling platform, whether it has been here on YouTube, whether it has been on Instagram, whether it has been on Whatnot, and I know the same things are being said, like on eBay, the same thing will happen on eBay. Um, and I know that there have been conversations with regards to individual sellers utilizing marketplaces on district, right? There are always going to be those that do very well, whether it is, and that can mean a wide variety of things. Okay. Well can mean I attract a lot of viewers. Well can mean I sell through all of my things. Well can mean I get the most money, right? Well can mean all of those things. And it's, whatever. There are those that do well, and there are those that struggle to do well. They struggle to even get people into their sales, right? So it's much more difficult for them to sell something at a profit. It's difficult for them to sell through all of those things. Because while the platforms have provided easy entry, what they don't provide is individual marketing, right? And then what happens, even when you are doing well, it begins to oversaturate. Then all of a sudden, there are all of these different places, there are all these different live sales. They're always going on at this time, at that time. And it is much harder then, especially if you are, this is your sole source of income, right? Once the market becomes overly saturated, it's difficult. It makes it much more difficult, even though you have engaged in these platforms. It makes it much more difficult to make it sustainable, profitable, right? So we were talking, I have a question for you. You've
Yeah.
been really using Airbnb for the last 5 years. Okay. Live in a town, population of 12,000. When you began to use Airbnb, okay, you were going on and you were looking up the area to see other rooms that were available. What did you notice 5 years ago versus what do you see today in comparison?
Just more of them.
More,
But that's to be expected.
is it?
Well, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, people are seeing an opportunity for supplemental income.
Okay.
It's very appealing to think that you can take a rental unit, put it into nightly rental, and charge $100 per night, as opposed to getting $600 for the month. You now have the option of getting $3,000 a month.
Mhm.
So, you don't have all the issues that come with a long-term renter. Um, Now you can set the parameters as host,
Mhm.
whether or not you will or won't accept pets, smoking,
Mhm.
any of these things. And you know, I personally don't, um, because the inn is all under one roof, and I've got multiple guests. I have had a no pet policy.
Mhm.
Um, the state obviously will not allow smoking inside the building. So those are specific to my business. Where Airbnb would have more flexibility with that.
Okay.
So um, that's not, I wasn't going in your direction
Oh,
on the saturation
where were
as
you
much as
going?
safety. Well, I think one
Oh,
of the
the
things,
safety.
yeah, one of the things that it was triggered from last week's conversation that I get a little defensive about Airbnb. Um, and it's because Airbnb, being a newer platform,
Mhm.
was flooded with people that love the concept of doing just that, being able to take their space and make a supplemental income on it. Some of these people are literally opening up their private space and renting a bedroom or an air
And
mattress
air, there
on
you
their
go.
living room floor. It
Mhm.
can be anything and everything they have found a way to make money on. What it boils down to, though, is there are some simple things that have not changed about transient use. And Airbnb has not kept up so much with this. As a host, when you go to list a property,
Mhm.
the first thing Airbnb does is they pop up and it says that I have read and I am in compliance with all of the state regulations and guidelines for transient use. And every state has a very specific rule book about what you have to have in place in order to have people spend the night in your house, your
Mhm.
building, your facility, whatever it
That
is
you're charging money for,
that
that
you're
you're
charging
making money
money.
for.
Yes. So, and this kind of opens the
Full
door
time or
for,
passive,
it
it
doesn't
doesn't
matter.
matter.
If anybody spends the night in your place and pays you to do so, you have created a business transaction. And this starts a whole chain of events, basically.
Okay.
And this is what most people don't understand about Airbnb. And I think that's the important thing to start to learn. And it has to do with the safety
Mhm.
because for me, I had to put an extensive fire protection system in the building because if there's a fire in the middle of the night and you're asleep and you wake up, you've got to know how to get out of the place
Mhm.
safely. Um, Nobody wants to die in a fire. So I have a whole list of things that I've put in place. I mean, I have a monthly monitored system that contacts the fire department if there's any issue. And this system monitors everything, all the smoke detectors, the furnaces, the electrical. It can trigger that alarm if anything goes wrong. And they call me immediately and tell me, hey, there's a problem in suite 100, and we want you to know about it so you can determine if there's an issue. So, and I won't go into all the details at the end specifically, but Airbnb as a host, you are asked, and it's your choice to say, yes, I am compliant, or no, I'm not. Nobody ever
But there's
checks.
no
No,
verification.
no, there's no verification and there's no check. All they are doing is passing their liability off to that host. So Airbnb is no longer responsible for a guest booking a room in a place that is not safe.
And
And
so that was just to clarify then. So really, like when you like as a host,
Mhm.
when you go to sign up, you're greeted with that screen, and then above and beyond just being like, yeah, check, I'm good.
Mhm.
There's no other verification with
There's no
regards
other
to
verification and there's no way to
fire
track that
safety. Okay.
either. So this has been a big discussion with me and the building department.
Mhm.
They're saying an Airbnb does not disclose the address of their properties either until you have reserved that room. So the building department can go on Airbnb and they can see how many listings are in our city, but they don't have the addresses. So it makes it very difficult for them to locate the properties and go in and say, look, you don't have an occupancy permit for transient use. You are renting this place nightly illegally. They cannot do that.
I'm gonna highlight Tracy's comment here. It's a longer one. I don't
Okay.
want to throw you off, okay? So, and I think that Tracy's been really good at being very succinct about it. And she says, exactly, Richard, the business owner has so much more that she has to deal with or extra expenses to where someone opening their home is profiting more so. This is what is wrong.
So that is my point. With Airbnb, Airbnb is a fantastic platform for me. Um, and I understand it. The problem is all the people who don't understand what they're doing, both from a host side
Or
and
care to
or
understand.
care as a host or a guest. You know, you as a guest make an assumption that you're going to stay in a place that
Is safe,
is safe and
secure.
legally operating.
Mhm.
And I would say that the majority of them are not legally operating. Again, codes vary depending on where you are in the country and the world, but most of the US is pretty consistent about having very specific fire codes in place
Mhm.
in a transient use situation.
Mhm.
So now I will also say that those codes are different from one building to the next. So, for me, I had the cottage listed on Airbnb for a while, but the cottage it was under 700 square feet. It had two entrances. It was one level. The fire codes were not near as strict. But when you go to rent an apartment and
Because you could climb out of the
you
window
could get
and
out of
you're
there
on
so
ground floor.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was very accessible to get in and out of. But if you go to New York City and you're on the 30th floor of an apartment building and you don't know where the fire exits are, you can't use the elevator, you don't have a map in the room of how to escape if there's a fire in the building, you know, that's a very different scenario. Same thing with renting a room that's above a restaurant. You know, if there's no fires, that's called a mixed use situation.
And you need a firewall.
Yeah, you have to have a firewall between the restaurant and the
The residents.
the unit, yeah, that you're sleeping in to protect that person that's sleeping there. So you can get into sprinkler scenarios and all these different things. So, depending on whether you're in a mixed use building or, I mean, there's so many factors that vary in
We're
that change the codes, but that
really
is what it is.
so like to like Tracy's point, and I think to what
Mhm.
you're saying is that when you do want to do it legitimately,
Mhm.
right?
You have to go to the building department, say, this is the unit I want to rent. They come out, they look at it, and they will tell you what you have to do to be compliant for safety.
Hmm.
And I haven't, there's some questions I'm not understanding with the building department because transient use is a very specific use on a building. It's a use on an occupancy permit.
Hmm.
So I don't know how a residential property can be doing transient use without changing the occupancy permit for the property.
Hmm.
Somehow they've made an allowance for that. But I will tell you that Airbnb came on so fast and furious. It was kind of like Uber. They didn't know how to handle it. Everybody jumped on this bandwagon. When I called my building department here, he was saying, well, we're trying to figure out what the regulation is for Airbnb. And we've called Columbus, which is our state capital. And they said, our only regulation for Airbnbs is that the host doesn't have a criminal background. That's what we're doing to ensure your safety as a guest.
But they don't really
And that has
check that
nothing
though.
to do.
Like, but
That's,
that's the thing though, like,
and
because
I'm like, that has nothing to do with transit use.
mhm.
Oddly enough, I could open the inn. Nobody ever did a background check on me to
Well, that's
see
what I
if
was
I
about
was
to
a
ask
criminal.
you, but how would they
No,
even
that
know
has
that?
nothing to do. They're concerned about, well, with, and
Well, to the
I hate
point.
to give them ideas.
Well, can I seriously? Oh,
We
I
leave
don't.
them
I am
loopholes.
hoping not too many criminals are watching me out
Yeah,
there. But if you are, no judgment. Everybody deserves a second chance. Um, I guess it's interesting, and I think that with regards to like the privacy of Airbnb, like I would assume many of you know, like when you go to look at an Airbnb, it doesn't actually give you the physical address
until you book the room.
until you book the room. And even if it'll just give you an approximator.
Mhm.
It doesn't tell you exactly where it is. And that is for, well, I think I personally, because I'm a little bit more
There's
cynical,
security.
well, I think that there's security in it, yes. But I think that it's kind of like a twofold, with regards to Airbnb. I think that it's a win-win for them because they can shield with it is protection, but then it also does it prevents the guest from kind of circumnavigating Airbnb to go and book
Yeah.
directly with
And they actually
the
do. I
individual.
did discover on my listings for Airbnb, I cannot put the name of my inn in the listing. It will block it out so that you cannot see it. You cannot book around Airbnb. They are very specific about doing that.
What if there's a watermark in the photo?
I don't know if they'd catch that or not. It doesn't matter because, for me in Urbana, I can say inn, I just can't say Scioto Inn. So in my listings, I say
Mhm.
historical inn in downtown Urbana. There's only one.
Yeah.
So it's not like, you're in a big city where you'd have to hunt to find it.
Mhm.
So people do find my listings on Airbnb and they call me directly.
Mhm.
Um, I'm going to you can start to see a whole host of problems here with the Airbnb platform. You've got hosts that are putting listings on that have no regulation on safety. Uh, the other big concern, and I have talked to multiple insurance agents about this, is that as a host, you put your listing out for transient use in your private home.
Mhm.
People think that their homeowner's policy will cover an accident. But the second you take a penny in retribution for that room, you've created a business. Your homeowner's policy no longer covers that person.
So, can I interject?
Mhm.
So, my question is, well, how would the insurance company know? And I think maybe some of you out there
Well,
might
believe
have
me,
experienced it because if there's an accident in your home to the detriment of whether it's the physical or a physical material, whether it's a physical impediment to the human or if it's a possession and you file a claim, what is the insurance company going to do?
they ask the questions. There
What
is
were they
not,
doing there?
yes, who is it and why were they there? There is not an insurance company that wants to pay out. We all know this. It's very difficult to get a claim. And I looked at Airbnb and they advertise, we have $1 million policy to protect our Airbnbs. Somebody gets hurt in your place. The problem is you've already checked the box that says you're compliant. And if you're not compliant, they are not obligated to insure you.
So can
So,
you clarify that again? So if you are somebody that has elected to, maybe you have a guest house. I see this a lot too. I'm starting like the guest house that's in the backyard. Maybe you've got a mother-in-law suite, or a
most,
room in the home. It's a private residence, and you've elected to list a room or accommodations on Airbnb. You've made that check mark that, yeah, I'm in compliance, with
as a host.
regulation as a
Yeah.
host. And you're operating under the mindset of, well, I have a homeowner's insurance policy.
Mhm.
You are not covered. Not only are you not covered as the host, but you are not covered as a guest. So if something were to physically happen to you or something were to happen to your property, you are SOL.
Mhm. The host actually stands to lose everything if they have a guest come in that gets hurt and they get sued. And I mean, that's a dangerous game to play.
Mm-hmm.
As a business, I carry a huge insurance policy for my guests. As a legitimate business, I have met all the regulations required for transit use. So on Airbnb, I have backup. They do have $1 million policy. So I'm kind of double covered for myself because I have done it right. But I will tell you that the majority of the listings I find on Airbnb do not go through this process
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that you're safe as a guest. Um, Back to my issue is that as a small business, all those things that I had to do to be compliant for transient use cost money.
Mm-hmm.
The renovation was incredibly expensive. The monthly fees are expensive. That monthly monitored system I pay for. I pay for inspections every year. My fire extinguishers have to be tested and tagged every year. I pay for that. So when I go on Airbnb and I see somebody a block away from me has a listing for $50 a night and my rate is 135, you know, it's easy to understand why the guest would say, gosh, I can just stay in this person's home at a fraction of the price of the inn.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually had people on Airbnb say, why would you stay in the expensive inn when you can stay with me for so much less? They
That
put
people
that
have
they
said that?
put that in their listing like we aren't in a small town. And I wouldn't know that.
Really?
Yes, they were actually bragging about that. And the interesting thing is there was absolutely no compliance. And they have gotten in trouble for that, not being in compliance. They took their listing off of Airbnb for a while. I did not turn them in.
I did.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
would.
no, it is,
I
and
would.
it's very dangerous because the majority of the hosts in Urbana are people that I know and like. And it's very difficult to turn people in. Um, but I'm trying to survive, to run a business in a market. The last time got on Airbnb and looked, there were 28 listings in our small town for Airbnb. Um, that really thins the market.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a large hotel. This is not a tourist destination, so it does make it difficult. But there, that's where there's nothing wrong with competition.
Mm-hmm.
On a regular basis, you have to look at your business and try to determine how to reinvent yourself and survive, how to offer a service that's above and beyond what everybody else does.
Mm-hmm.
And I can accept that. With Airbnb, my big issue is, I think I personally feel like the city has turned a blind eye to the Airbnbs.
To the point, if I may,
Mhm.
to the point where when we talk about privacy, and this has been, and you'll have to pardon me because it was one of those things where when a lot of the conversations were being had, it didn't apply to me in any way, but there was, I know when Airbnb was really becoming a big thing, there were a lot of, and maybe some of you are familiar with it, maybe some of you have engaged in the conversations, but that there were a lot of cities that there was one locally, I think, that they do not permit Airbnbs in in their city, in their
Mhm.
county. And the reason is because they don't want their location, one, to have the burden of that. They've got a lot of transient people coming in. They know that a lot of the people aren't registered, they're not insured, they're not kind of like above board, and they don't want their community to be sullied by people having poor experiences vis-a-vis through Airbnb, through another booking site. And they just don't want the community to be tarnished by that.
I will give you a short list on the economy. When you put houses, this is not, it's a little different if I'm just taking a room out of my personal residence.
Mhm.
But if you are taking rental properties and turning them into Airbnbs, you're taking properties out of the rental market, the apartment rentals, you're taking houses out of the market. And and I think a lot of cities are concerned about that. They are concerned about the influx of tourism, who's coming in, why they're coming in. But then on the Airbnbs, again, without the regulation, I know a lot of these Airbnb owners are not collecting state tax. They don't recognize the fact that this income is a service provided that is taxed by the state. They're not collecting it, they're not paying it. That's illegal. I mean, the federal government, I don't,
Now, I
there's
did,
a whole host of things not
I mean, I
happening
think that,
on Airbnb.
and this is the thing. I mean, we can all, we all have our gripes.
Mhm.
We all have our gripes with the taxes of it all,
Yeah.
right? Death and taxes, right? But at the end of the day, that, and I do admire that about you, especially when it comes to the bed tax, is that you value it. But those taxes are there and they do serve a purpose. And when we talk about like your city tax, those taxes are collected um, for the city to operate on. Same thing with the state, same thing with the federal. We all have our personal thoughts and feelings on where those rates should be, what shouldn't, be taxed. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. Okay. That is the fact.
Mhm.
We can feel however we want, we can think however we want about it. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. So, all of these businesses, and that is fundamentally what it does turn into. And the same thing with like the whole reselling game is that at the end of the day, it is still a business. And it is a business that even the federal government, and I have to look it up, I don't know what it is this year, but the federal government does, in fact, allow a very small business to operate. It was 26,000. It went down to like 600. It's back up to a couple of thousand. Like you can operate as a legitimate business, very small, keep in mind, throughout the course of the year and not actually have to pay your federal tax on it. So there is that to help mitigate it. Um, so to I think to have a business operate and not pay the taxes, it's just one of those things where again when you're trying to do something legitimately and everybody's like, yeah, well, I'm just sticking it to the man. There are those of us that don't have the option to just stick it to the man, and it makes it that much harder.
Well, and that was my point.
Mhm,
It's one thing if everybody's on the same ball field.
mhm.
If we all, it is totally fine that there are other hotels, there are Airbnbs. That is not the problem. But when you have people doing it illegally that are able to undercut, um, and they put such a strain on the ones that are legitimate that they put them out of business, you have to look at what's going to happen in the future. What does that leave your community? So, um,
But so that is um there is no way. Well, I mean, I guess there could be ways that Airbnb could verify that information, but they currently do not verify if you are operating a legitimate
Airbnb
insured.
doesn't care.
Okay.
because they make money. And that's what I started to say. I personally feel like in my community, the city has turned a blind eye because they're making money on everyone that's out there. So it's a
But
little
are
bit,
they?
it's a conflict of interest. Yes, they are, because every time an Airbnb rents a room, the city has gone through and they have a list of every Airbnb. They have managed to pull them together and they are making sure that every one of those people that are on Airbnb are paying that tax.
But just so long as they pay their bed tax,
Mhm.
and that
They are
doesn't
collecting that money. They
doesn't
see it as an asset to the community because you're bringing tourism in, but they don't, it's just not that simple. Um, Again, when it's not done legally, um, this is, well, I mean, I could go on and on about the list of things that are not done appropriately and how it affects the community. But
Mhm.
in a nutshell, from the guest standpoint, I think that was our point with everybody here tonight, was just giving information on the fact that, as you're traveling and making decisions about where you stay, um, for me, that button that I get pushed on is the safety for people, because I've gone through such lengths to provide a safe environment for guests. It concerns me when I know people are using Airbnb as a platform to go find a place to stay. Now, we use Airbnb. We've traveled on it. We've found great places, and I think there are things that you can start to learn to look for when
Mhm.
you're looking at Airbnbs. Um, Look at the description.
Well, that's what I was
It's
gonna.
it's
Yeah.
pretty easy to tell. Like with my listing that I'm an inn, you can assume that if somebody's listing a bed and breakfast or an inn, that they probably have gone through all the regulations, and you are at that point supporting a small business. You're getting that experience that you're looking for.
Mhm.
You may have to pay a little bit more, but understand you're paying more to protect yourself.
Well, and I think
Some
that
people still aren't going to care.
I
They'll take
was
that risk,
I
but
was watching Judge Judy.
yeah, I
Well, but she
know.
had, hey,
Uh-huh.
she's full of good information.
She
I'm
is.
telling you, because she don't play, and I appreciate that. It's easy to understand.
Yeah.
She's plain spoken. She's to the point. We're not doing all the gobbledygook, as she would say. But at the end of the day, you pay for what you get. um, you know, with regards to, well, how do we communicate then to individuals? Well, what should you look out for? If you see a room and it's $50 a night, better chances are that they are
It's too
not
good to be
insured.
true.
They are not,
Hmm.
it's too good to be true. And I think that sometimes people may think, well, Airbnb is going to cover me. They
You
are
get what you pay for.
exactly. Say we love, go ahead,
Yeah.
Chloe. Um, you
Family does too.
you get what you pay for. Yeah. And that's the number one red flag. And listen, Airbnb at the end of the day is going to make their money. They're going to make their money on the $50 a night. They're going to make their money on the $500 a night.
And they have no liability, so
And
they
they
don't
have,
care.
right. So, and that's the point,
Hmm.
is that, sometimes you got to make the decision that's best for you. And sometimes, even though you might save a few dollars,
Hmm.
you're better safe than sorry, at the end of the day. And that's always something, especially when you're traveling, especially when you're going somewhere, you're literally booking blind. You don't, 9 out of 10 times on Airbnb, do they not allow exterior photos?
No, they do.
I rarely see exterior
Well, you
photos
rarely
of a
do.
lot of. That is another red flag. If you don't see exterior photos, please do not make the booking. You don't know where you're staying.
Mhm.
You don't have an address. You can't Google it. You can't do
You do have to be
street
very
view.
careful.
Those are things that you do have to be careful for. There are horror stories. Some of you, Karen was sharing one earlier, you don't know
Mhm.
you know and listen, whether you stay in the $50 or the $500 one, accidents happen no matter where you stay. There's no guarantee, but if something does happen, you stand a better chance of being protected if you are staying in a legitimate business,
Mhm.
and that is what is so incredibly important. Julie's saying the county that she lives in has cracked down on the illegal Airbnbs. They have a department at the county that tracks it. There we go. Yeah.
And that's the way it should be.
Mhm. Um, well, there's Miss Kathy Rose.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Capitalism. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
She's saying we've had some pretty nasty experiences with Airbnb, and cost didn't matter. It takes that one time,
Well,
and then you're like,
that's absolutely true because we looked at one of the Airbnb listings and it wasn't cheap at all here in town. And you're literally staying in this guy's apartment. Um, there was, I mean, it was, we looked at the listing and just started laughing and couldn't believe that anybody would want to stay there. And it was pricey.
yeah, it was like 300 and something dollars a night. And I mean, I will say this though, it was very clear where you were going to stay. I mean,
It was still your choice.
there's an exercise thing right in the middle of the living
Uh,
room. I mean, you were straight up subletting,
it was,
not even subletting.
well, he did the same thing. He had an air mattress
Yeah,
that you were sleeping on an air mattress in a room.
yeah,
It wasn't even a
for
mattress.
three something a
Uh,
night. But again, and this is also something that I think that is incredibly important, and I really appreciate you making this point because that was so lost on me because it has very much become a huge talking point for our political candidates is the housing prices.
mhm.
And when you really think about that, there are a lot of people that have very much taken homes that they have gotten very inexpensively with the sole intention of turning them into a rental property, but not a traditional rental property, but into an Airbnb because you will make more money renting something out on a nightly rate than you will.
Yes, but it also comes at a much higher risk.
It does, but
Yeah, people are willing to take the risk.
they are. But the point that you made is that those homes then, and I think maybe to
That's how
Julie's point,
it really impacts the community.
it hugely impacts the community. And we don't necessarily think, oh, well, one or two or three. But if it's one or two or three in every community across the United States, that creates a tremendous problem for all people and many people that are just, they're just looking for somewhere to live.
Yeah.
And they can't because now the community is nothing but short term Airbnb, Verbos, and
Yeah.
what options are you left with? So it does have an impact on us just as
It's
community members, whether you're looking to travel or not.
and there are points of that are good and bad when you take those houses out of the market.
Mhm.
The rent, you have less places to rent, so rental cost goes up.
Yeah.
Um, when you have less houses to sell, houses house prices go up.
Mhm.
So it can actually start to increase property value in the community.
Can it?
Is that a good or a bad thing?
Well,
Well,
I
yeah,
don't.
because if there are less houses to buy and people are willing to pay more for the ones that are available,
Yeah, but I question,
how
because,
sustainable is it?
well, mom asked this question the other day. She said, with regards to the house, she said, I have a question. She said, I don't, she said, I don't, she doesn't think there's nothing wrong with it. As a single mother, we rented a lot of when I was younger. Um, but when you become a property owner, are you comfortable when the street is nothing but rental units? And the reason is because whether we like it or not, there isn't necessarily the same investment in that property financially, personally, as there would be to somebody who actually was the property owner. And above and beyond that, though, is that when you are somebody that is living in a neighborhood that has got, say, two or three, and they're not just rental properties, but they're transient use properties, you don't know who is coming in and out of your neighborhood.
Mhm.
So I question, I understand like the supply, the guns and butters of it all for economics, supply and demand. But when I really look at it as if I were to be a home buyer and I knew that three of those properties were rental, not they weren't just rental properties, but it was for transient use, I don't know that that actually increases property
So
value, does it?
this is actually an interesting point because anytime you go into as a buyer and you go
Mhm.
in to buy a house
A
in
property,
a
a home
property,
buyer.
a
Okay.
home buyer, most people tend to like to buy property that is zoned residential.
Okay.
They don't want to get into a mixed use situation where you could have a factory on one side of you, you could have the prison on the other side of you. You want, in order to protect your investment, you're buying a home that's in a residential neighborhood. It's zoned residential. Now, transient use is a business. They look at it the same as an accountant that has an office in his home, um, somebody that does massage therapy, somebody that cuts hair. It's small, light business. So you can change the use of your house from residential to residential with light business. But that has to be rezoned. It's spot zoned. And at least in our area, I don't know if this is national or not, in order to change that zoning, everybody within a certain radius of that house has to approve of it. So in Urbana, we have a street called Scioto Street where all the large old homes are. And for years, people wanted to come in and open bed and breakfast in those homes, which honestly, I think, it could have done wonders because these people are going to fix up these big old houses.
Susan said, FY, don't pay a contractor up front.
Yeah. um, However, in order to open a bed and breakfast, which was a home with light business, they had to have approval from every other neighbor. Every other neighbor looked at it and said, we're opening a can of worms. If we allow a business to go in this house, we would have to allow it everywhere. And we want to protect these homes as residential, um, strictly residential homes. We don't want any of these old houses to turn into businesses. So they would turn them down, and those houses never had a bed and breakfast move in for that reason. So a lot of these Airbnbs are taking these houses in residential neighborhoods, converting them into transient use. They are not zoned for that. So now you have a neighbor that doesn't just have a rental, they have a transient use rent. That means every night you could have a different person coming in and you have no control over who that is.
Yeah.
I mean, what their background is or anything. They're right next door to you.
Well, that's, and like what Tracy is saying that is it's one thing if it's a traditional renter.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? Because you can build a rapport, you can build a relationship. And at the end of the day, a neighbor is a neighbor, whether it's a renter, whether it's a property owner.
You at
You
least,
can like them or you
yeah,
cannot like them. That doesn't change the
at least
situation.
you learn what you have to work with,
Exactly.
whether you need to build a fence or
Right.
what.
Right.
But when every day is different and
And
you
you
don't
don't
know from
know.
day to day what you're going to get, that would be a real problem for me investing into that neighborhood. I wouldn't want to buy a house that was right next door to that.
Yeah. Well, but see, that's the other thing though too, is that just like Airbnb isn't necessarily checking or verifying a criminal background
Mhm.
on a host, they're certainly not doing that on a guest.
Mhm.
Now, that's not to say that there isn't a rating system that does exist,
Yeah.
and both a booker and a host, you can leave a feedback on a guest saying, "I would never book to them," right? And the same thing could
Yeah.
happen.
So there
You,
are reviews on there
mhm,
both ways. You review the host and you review the guest.
mhm. But
But
that doesn't prevent.
when they,
Well,
as a host, they will, because I want to screen everybody that requests a room through
mhm,
Airbnb. So I get a notification that somebody wants to book. And I can look at it and it always says Airbnb has verified this guest. All they have verified is that, and somehow they say this person is who they say they are.
mhm,
And we have verified that they have a credit card that we can collect on. So you will get paid.
mhm.
They don't do any type of background check. You then can go into that guest review and see what other hosts have said about that guest. And that's your best bet. I still don't know anything about the person other than other hosts have not had a bad experience.
Mhm.
So I feel safe enough that they won't be a bad experience for me. I will tell you one of the first guests I had on Airbnb was
The
in the
cottage.
cottage, and this guy came in. He did not have a picture listed. I knew nothing that he had a name, and it says he was verified, and that's. But I'm thinking, this is Airbnb. It should be okay. I got him in. He booked for a week. At one point, and I believe he was having issue logging into the Wi-Fi, and he let me come into the cottage, and I saw a table full of drugs, various drugs. I'm sure there was not a legal one on there. I know most of it was not legal at the time, if you catch my drift. But when he left, he did a tremendous amount of damage to the property. He broke windows. He ruined pots and pans. He
See,
dumped food on the floor.
this is why we work, because Richard's like, because when he left, when Richard comes up and tells me something like this, I'm like, we calling the cops and they're gonna come and get him out right now. There is no when he leaves. No, he's leaving right now.
But I did try to file a claim with Airbnb, and all of it was denied. They would not reimburse any of the damages that were done. And I thought that was really interesting. They put me through a really long process of getting quotes for damages, sending pictures to them of everything that was done, and they still denied the claim. So I didn't make any money on that booking, which I thought was kind of interesting. So you do learn quickly that you
Well,
have to be very careful.
well, and I think that this is the thing though too is, and not only do I like Judge Judy, but I do like Dateline. I like the crime docuseries kind of stuff. And this is the thing at the end of the day is that somebody can be nice as pie, but that don't mean nothing. I mean, John Wayne Gacy,
Mhm.
Ted Bundy,
Yeah.
Jeffrey Dahmer. Do those names ring a bell? But here's the thing.
Mhm.
They were all very nice. They were all very charming. Do you know what I'm saying? So, and that's the thing is that that person that is doing that kind of stuff, they can be very nice. They
Mhm.
could be a great guest.
He apparently went to a gun range. When I walked in, he
Oh,
had
I thought you were talking about
no,
me. I
this
was like, no,
guest.
they didn't.
He had, when you go to a gun range, they have the silhouette of the person all the way down, and you're shooting at it to see how close you can get to a target. He took that back and taped it to the refrigerator in the cottage
See,
and left that for me with the bullet holes in it.
that's
And I'm
why we
thinking,
went. No,
why would you leave that?
no, no. We would have called the cops. You would have
Mhm.
come up here and said, "There is a guest. There is
I didn't know that until he was gone.
the drugs.
Well, no, I knew that.
All right, you need to come and get them out now."
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, we digress.
Yes, we'll digress.
But that could be right next door to you
Mhm.
in an Airbnb situation. You have no idea who's coming in.
Yes. And that is, by and large, I would say this, even over the course of the last 2 years, I think that most people are respectful. Do you know what I mean? But
Mhm.
sometimes you just get those ones where it's just like, oh my God, I would never go into your home. Like, I would not go into your home.
I've had 13 years of this,
Uh-uh.
so I have some stories. Michael is getting acclimated.
Hmm.
he's getting a dose, but he hasn't seen the worst of it. Yep, it's an interesting business. But anyway,
Yes, yes, it
so we
is.
were also going to talk about Expedia.
We do want to talk about Expedia. And the one thing that
I
I really want to make sure that you communicate is something that I found to be very surprising,
hmm,
is that it's not just Expedia.
that's what I was going to say.
Okay. So this I think
I
is incredibly fascinating. We hear about all of these booking sites,
hmm,
but what is like, and we're thinking in our head,
okay, I'll tell him. So,
he wants to.
co-
Did you hear he slapped me?
so COVID was very interesting here. for obviously tourism tanked. And I had a whole year of a very quiet building. And Expedia at that point reached out to me. And so I think everybody's pretty familiar. I think the part that most people don't know, and when I say Expedia, there was a very specific reason it was Expedia. Expedia is the mother company. Expedia owns every one of those travel sites that you see on TV. Trivago, hotel.com. I mean,
I'm sure there's
I
many
think
more.
anyone you could name is owned by Expedia. So
Is
when
that
they,
not crazy? Did
I
y'all
did
know
not know
that?
this. And the reason they can guarantee the lowest rate is because they own every one of those companies. So it doesn't matter which one you
And they
call.
police it.
Yeah. So here's what it boils down to. Expedia calls me. They want me to sign up with their company. They will put my listings out for anybody to be able to book through their site. They put that listing out on every one of those sites: Trivago, hotel.com, Expedia. My listing was the same across the board. When they came to me, they said, "We want your guaranteed lowest rate. You cannot offer anybody a rate any less than what we have." So, for example, I had a room. Um, one of my rooms was listed at 115, and I didn't want to take less than that. So I just said, "This is my lowest rate is $115 for a night." They did let me supposedly set some parameters where I said I would not accept a booking within 24 hours. They did not honor that. Um, and that was ultimately the biggest issue I had with it. The advantage to being on Expedia was because that company is so large and it gets so many hits on Google that when you do a search for lodging in Urbana, the first thing that pops up is anybody that's listed on Google or on Expedia.
Expedia.
So
And
they
what did I tell you about that
they
today?
they bury the competition down. So when you do a search for lodging, you're going to see anybody that's on Expedia first. You have to go a couple pages in to start to find anybody who's not on that site. So we're going to come back to that too because of the Google reviews.
Okay.
But
He's got it all planned out,
uh,
clearly.
I just thought that was really fascinating. So they came to me and wanted my lowest rate. The problem was they were keeping an outrageous percentage of
So
the
they
rental fee.
held you to your lowest possible rate.
Uh-huh. And then every time I booked the room of that 115, they were keeping almost 30% commission for booking the room. What they didn't tell me was they have this elite member status that offers an additional discount. So if you pay to
To
be
somebody
this,
who is booking.
yeah, I believe this has been a little while since I've dealt with it, but and it caught me off guard because not only did they take their 30%, they took an additional fee for their elite member. So,
They
you know,
took
when
it
it was
from
all
you.
said
They
and done,
weren't going to
yeah,
diminish
they
their
didn't take it
profit.
out of their profit. They took it out off of mine, and I don't ever remember agreeing to that. But at the end of the day,
That's the
$115 rental, I ended up seeing about $70 of it. And I thought, well, I can't do that. But then they quit working under my parameters as well. They allowed guests to walk in my front door, get on their phone, and book a room. I wasn't even in town. I couldn't let those people into a room. So I said, "There's no way that I can honor this reservation." And they said, "Well,
just to clarify
uh,
though too, because I know some people might hear that and be like, well, why wouldn't you? Because, and this is important to understand, is that
I don't have employees.
you are
I don't have a check-in
sole right.
desk. Yes,
Yeah,
I am the owner operator. So if I'm not on site and somebody walks in, they can't just book a room. There's no check-in desk. There's no,
they can't walk
yeah,
into the room.
yeah, the rooms are locked. So there's nobody here to unlock the door to let you in. So, and I was actually out of town celebrating something and I was 2 hours away. there was no way I could get back to honor that reservation. And I said, well, first of all, I don't do walk-in reservations through Expedia. Um, the gentleman that booked the room actually called me and I said, I don't know how you were even able to make the reservation because I have a very specific policy that I don't allow that. He said, well, they allowed it and they have already taken the money off my credit card. So the next, I said, well, the interesting thing with Expedia was as a host, there was no possible way of getting a hold of anybody at that company. As a guest, you could easily get a hold of somebody. And so I had to have the guest call. And of course, once he complained, Expedia called me immediately. And their resolution was either I open up a room or I have to pay to relocate him at a cost of 300 and some dollars was their charge to me for them to relocate him into another facility. And I held strong and said absolutely not. Look at my
You
stipulations.
violated the term.
It was not me. It was you that violated the terms. So they let it go, but they did it to me 2 more times. And after the third time, I was like, I don't want to be on your site anymore. And at that point, they wanted me to start filing all this paperwork and everything else. It's a long story, but they were incredibly difficult to work with. They are not small business friendly. They work for hotel chains where
They can turn the volume.
They have the ability to do volume. Yeah. If there's a reservation that comes in like that, most of these places will have a room available. They have that cushion. So, but I don't think a lot of people realize when they go to those sites how damaging it is to, especially a small business. And I was quick to tell people, not only were they charging me 30%, they were charging the guest a fee too. So they were making a tremendous amount of money. It wasn't just a one-sided fee; it was two-sided.
That is crazy.
So Expedia makes a tremendous amount of money. So
because they pay like the Airbnb, you pay a booking fee.
Yes.
So it's
So even though it was $115 list price, you were paying additional fees to Expedia. So
they are, just to clarify, it is Louis who is crying, and he's crying because he is an incredibly sweet boy, but he is also very needy. So when somebody is not like holding him or petting him, it's the end of the world.
Lightly spoiled.
Gracie, fine, no problem.
So anyway,
yes, we've got just a few minutes left because Fat Pros is coming on. I know that there is something that with regards to the burying.
So if you guys ever want to help a small business out, Michael taught me this. One of the best things you can do is leave a Google review. A lot of my guests would get on different sites and try to leave reviews. What was the one that
Yelp?
Yes, Yelp reviews and all that. And it's nice. I mean, they're there. It's it's visible, but the Google review is the one that actually helps your business move up in the search engine. So it is the most beneficial for a small business. Not only are you giving hopefully a good review,
yes,
you're helping that business be found by other people.
Stand out.
Stand out.
So and that's the thing though too, is like, especially in the modern world,
these big companies are just buried.
Well, it's twofold. It's when you talk about Miss Jackson as a Google reviewer, it is those, and you have to think about it just like in your daily life. When you want to look something up or you want to find out additional information in this modern world, a lot of times we Google it, right? So if I want to know about Urbana and I Google it, I'm going to see the things that are going to come up are the things that have traditionally the most engagement. And so Google is very much, obviously we know that, it's a computer, but it very much has its own algorithm to it though too. And it helps small businesses, locations, when you as somebody who has used a service, purchased a product there, um, whether it's a museum, an inn, a restaurant, if it is a business, by and large, they're all going to have um, Google reviews. And if you really want to support, I don't think people still use Yelp. I think there are a couple that do, but like a Facebook review, it doesn't, you know, because again, think about it. If I'm going somewhere, I'm going to Google it. I can Google the entire town to find out, you know, where is this in this town? Where is that in this town? That's why Google, it is so important because most of us do use Google. And when you leave the Google review, it does help that business stand out more. There are exceptions, and Expedia is really good at this. I don't know that Airbnb does it, but when you do Google something, and this is incredibly important to understand as a consumer, when you Google anything, and especially like if you're on your phone, there's like it almost creates like a blue square around it, but in the bottom right hand corner you will see something called ad. And what that means is it's not to say that it's illegitimate, it just means that a company or a business has paid Google money to be the first thing that comes up when you do that search.
Sponsored.
Oh, sponsored. You're right.
Yes.
It says sponsored.
Yeah.
Sponsored or ad.
Okay.
It might be
It'll be
because
next to the name.
you have Apple, I have Samsung. I know
I
that
didn't know
that
that.
sounds like it could. I don't know. But
Okay.
it'll say sponsored or it'll say ad. And it says it, they're legally required per FTC, Federal Trades Commission, to have to disclose that before you even click on it. So in the bottom right, you're always going to see sponsored and or ad, whichever one, both at times. Okay. Um, that means that that business has paid Google to be the first result on a Google search. And that can cost a lot of money. So when I search Urbana, Ohio, what's the first thing that comes up?
Probably cobblestone.
I thought you knew this. We were talking about it earlier.
Told you I don't get on there very often. When you Google what
Urbana.
lodging,
Yeah.
it would be cobblestone.
Okay. I thought you said it was something else.
Oh, what did I say?
You,
I don't know. Just tell me.
it was Expedia that came up.
Oh, well, that's why. Because our hotel in town is on Expedia. So, but you can tell it lists the hotel, but that's why.
Because they
So it
pay.
goes on, but then it also starts listing hotels that are in surrounding communities because they're also on Expedia. So even though you search lodging in Urbana, Ohio, you're getting all these places out of town because they're on Expedia and Expedia is burying everything else that's local.
Mhm.
So they're going to promote everybody that's listed with them.
And then everything else gets buried.
Mhm.
Even though you're engaging with reviews, which is incredibly important, and it does help, you know, it will help that business be right after those sponsored ads. But that is why it's so incredibly important and important to understand the distinction. Yes.
Well, I might be moving up.
There you go. You did. I think that you did. Well, I think a
Yeah.
lot of that though has to do with the ads or your reviews.
Yeah.
You know, those things are incredibly important. And again, that is a way in which you can better support your small businesses. This isn't just exclusive to the inn. Clearly, we are talking about it from the inn because this is the personal
What we do,
perspective, right?
yes.
But that doesn't mean that you can't apply this to other businesses within your community, businesses that you frequent, that you love. And if you haven't done it, it doesn't take that long. It takes like 2 minutes to leave a Google review. And it is so incredibly impactful to that small business, especially with the way that, you know, a company like Expedia can spend millions of dollars to pay Google to be the first search result, right? Yes.
I I work hard for that.
You do. That is true. That is true.
We've gotten Michael trained very well too. Keep those good reviews coming, man.
Mhm. I'll expect the check later on. Cash. Hmm.
So, what do you guys think? Do you have any questions? Because have you learned anything, or did I put everybody to sleep?
No, I don't think you put everybody to sleep. Lisa says good talk tonight. It really kept my interest. Learned a lot. Thank you, Michael and Richard. Thank you for saying this. Julie worked for the Chamber of Commerce for 10 years, and reviews are important for the Chamber of Commerce. I have, you know, I have, and I think that that's, one thing that I did want to talk about today, and I guess that we should, I'll get this in before we do go, is that, and I think that, it's not just technologically driven. And I think that this is so incredibly important to small businesses to understand this. And I think that a lot of times you don't know it until you know it. And I don't hear enough people saying this. And this is going to sound so counterintuitive to what I think a lot of people have been taught, or this is what we should do because this is the modern world, and this is the technology. And I do believe that we can be stronger together in many ways. But when it comes to a small business, if there's somebody out there that wants to operate a small business, regardless of what that business is, there are many organizations, there are many platforms with which you can invest in. My best advice to you is to always focus on your business. There are a variety of different resources that you can take that are of no cost to you, especially with the utilization of social media, that, investing your time, energy, and effort or finances into a third party platform, into an organization, into a social club of some sorts to make it feel like I'm not alone, right? Like somebody's got my back. I've got people that understand me, that we've talked about certain things in this, in the live chats about toxic behaviors or the market's oversaturated. You've got large companies taking advantage of smaller companies. You got to focus on your own at the end of the day, because whether it's Julie at the Chamber of Commerce.
She wants to know what the look was for.
Julie, you know exactly what I mean about the Chamber of Commerce. Come on.
That's a job I wouldn't want.
Yeah, no. I just, again, you're always going to have different personalities.
Mhm.
And nothing that I've talked about, why clearly I speak about it through the lens of my experience, it's not exclusive to content creators, it's not exclusive to resellers. Having Richard come on and expressing, things that occur within his industry, those are things that I identify with as a reseller. And we have very different
Mhm.
businesses at the end of the day. There may be those of you out there that own your own business, yet you're able to identify or to connect with these things. They're not exclusive to any one industry. And I think that that's important. I think that more people should kind of stand up and say, you can do this by yourself. You can utilize, like an Instagram, you can utilize Facebook, you can utilize YouTube, and those things are all free to you to use. You don't have to rely on a third party platform to get your name out there. Because at the end of the day, while it might make it a little bit easier, you are paying for it to be made easier for you. And it might not be money that you have to invest. It can come with putting yourself in positions where then you are having to work amongst individuals that you fundamentally don't know. And it can have negative impacts and results, not only to you as an individual, but to your business. And a lot of these platforms exist not to benefit the individual business, but to benefit the larger business, to benefit their investors and their boards. And those are things that are so incredibly important to keep in mind so that you are, as a business owner, better able to make decisions that will better benefit you, not just in the short term, but also in the long term, so that you set yourself up for success. Never knew any of it, she says. Urbana used to be an, an antique store
Sorry,
heavy
heavy
city.
city.
Yeah.
Mhm. We've actually talked about that because the locals did not like the fact that there were so many antique shops in Urbana. And this was only, what, 6 years ago?
Hmm.
Um, we had at least 14 shops downtown that were antiques, but it created a destination for our community. And we saw a huge um, uptick in tourism.
Hmm.
And the locals just didn't recognize that. It was something to build off of. Once you have that destination in place, then you can support the restaurants, you can support some other stores, the boutiques, and we were on the right path, but um, there was just some short-sightedness
Hmm.
locally that caused a lot of those stores to close. And then we're back to trying to work from scratch again. How do we get people to come here? Um,
There wasn't the patience. There
mhm,
wasn't the follow through. There wasn't the commitment,
yeah.
is what it
So
was.
that is, you never want to put all your eggs in one basket,
Hmm.
but we really had a good thing going there.
Yeah.
And it was a shame to see that disappear. So, but yes, it was known for the antiquing for a while.
We've got
Oh,
we
say
gotta go.
goodnight.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Okay. It's been
Because
fun.
Fatbird Finds is going to be on here at 9 o'clock. You have just enough time to go to the bathroom and grab a drink, right? We really do appreciate you guys being here with us this evening. Whether again you are here with us live in the chat or if you are watching the replay, again, as a reminder, just because the live portion of the discussion has ended doesn't mean that the conversation has to stop. We do have the comment section down below. Please make sure to leave your comment. Remember, don't just drop a comment, but check out the things that other people are saying. Don't forget to give them, your fellow community members, a thumbs up and engage with them. It does my heart good. So, yes. Thank you, Connie. The best has survived. There you go. We really appreciate you. Good night to everybody. Thank you, Richard, for coming
Yep.
on, for sharing it.
Yep.
We
I appreciate
appreciate you.
Yep. It was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening.
He might be back. You never know. You never know.
Got to find a topic I can say something about.
There you go. So, guys, Misty and I will be back Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern with our weekly Tuesday sale. Got a surprise video coming out for you tomorrow evening. Looking forward to that dropping. Mama Wanda will be with me. So, yes, hope you all have a good night, a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you all soon.
Good night.
Bye, guys.